All right. Hi, everybody. I could see you when the lights were on, but you all are looking great today. So thank you for being here. I'm Kathy Fernandez, and I have the great honor of heading up our content development team at ESPN, in charge of our 30 for 30s, our films, our series, our narrative shorts, and podcasts. And I am giddy about today's panel because I think the worlds of both Dan, Anouk, and Ben, and I'm honored that they could have joined us today. I will let them introduce themselves before we dive into today's topic, which is one of my absolute favorites, especially as a development executive, which is the art of archive and how it doesn't just integrate into a story, it's usually the story and the thing that really guides us. And so today we'll talk a lot about that. But first, I'll start with you, Dan, to tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I'm a rarity in the world documentary. I'm a Sheffield-based filmmaker. If you're from Sheffield, you recognise the little badge. And I've got a company called Very Much So Films, which is based here since 2001. My very first feature doc, The Game of Their Lives, opened DocFest 2002. Film last year was Strike, which won the Audience Award, which I don't like to talk about. And probably best known for Hillsborough, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point, but was, although it's a very, very British film, and here it was on the BBC and won the BAFTA here, but it was very much driven by ESPN. It ended up being a collaboration, but it was, without ESPN, it wouldn't have happened, which is, again, for me, incredible. And that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Dan. Anouk.
I'm Anouk. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Neo Studios. Neo Studios is a production company mainly making sports stories, sports documentaries and films. We are based in London, but we work across Europe. I have exec produced a few of our shows. The Giants was about sumo wrestling, the recent Muller story in Germany, but also Take Us Home Leeds United. But I'm really glad to be here and talk about archive.
I'm honored you're here. Thank you. Ben.
I'm Ben Turner. I'm one of the founding partners of what is now Fullwell Entertainment. We started out making sports docs. Our first film was released in 2007. We followed 5 football freestylers who busked their way from London to Buenos Aires to shake the hand of God and meet Diego Maradona. And along the way, we've made lots of quite a wide range of content, but always, because I love football so much and wasn't good enough to play it, use filmmaking as a way of getting close to football. We made a series called Sons Until I Die about the football club that I love very much, and recently have merged with the Spring Hill Company, which is LeBron James's company, so doing much more stuff out in the US, and I'm learning about basketball very quickly.
These three are extremely humble, but what I love about them is that they're all brilliant in so many ways, in the way that they partner, the way that they show up for talent, creative, and nurture it in the big screen. So today, once again, thank you for joining us. 30 for 30 is a brand that has been around for over 15 years, and it's really focused in a director's perspective of a moment in time. And so we are a historical brand. It usually starts with something that's been at least 10 years removed and sort of starts you into a conversation rooted in sports and athleticism, but takes you far beyond that. So to kick off our conversation, I'll play a little clip of one of our recent films. It's called I'm Just Here for the Riots, and it's really a film that took place and captures Game 7 of a hockey game in Canada where the entire community is super excited to, the potential to win after many, many years of not winning. And when things go awry, they literally start to riot. And a lot of the archive really drove that. And so the reason why I want to show you this clip is because Dan does something really beautifully in his 1988 Seoul Olympics film. And it'll give you a little bit of taste of how we utilize archive in 30 for 30. This then enlisted people. It was the boom of the internet at the time for them to literally go into a finding spree of trying to figure out all these people that were rioting and turning this entire town upside. But it leads to a larger conversation about both fandom and about the start of the internet and about this witch hunt, essentially, that enlisted right after in trying to get people to sort of be held accountable. Dan, you utilize archive really beautifully, and we've had the honor of seeing it firsthand at 30 for 30 and through your film of 1988. Can you explain to me a little bit about how, when you uncovered that archive, how does that lead to what we'll eventually see on the screen here?
Yeah, very, very good question, opening question, which we weren't briefed on before, so I'll see what I can do. So I've always been driven by archive, always driven by the story and the character actually, but it tends to be historical, so it tends to be archive. And 979, which I think you're about to watch a clip from, was sort of conceived in 2008, and I was in Seoul at the time giving a symposium to South Korean filmmakers because I'd done 3 North Korean films, and I was just in a break. There was me and another English filmmaker there, that we were sort of taking turns in doing stuff, and I was just sort of doodling, and then I just thought, I was like, World Cups and Olympics, and I started listing each one, what the years and what were the main stories, and I just kept coming back to 1988 because at the time it was the fastest race ever. There were 4 people under 10 seconds, and then it turned out to be the dirtiest race because Ben Johnson, the winner, got done for drugs. 7 of the 8 were later had some sort of drug question mark hanging over them. So it was like the dirtiest race in history. And ESPN had just set up the 30 for 30 brand. There were 30 films commissioned for the 30th anniversary. They went for all the top directors. I must have been 31st. And we opened, or were the second, for the second series. And it was really like, oh my God, for a filmmaker who does archive and loves sports and likes to tell like human stories through sport, there was suddenly this new brand where everyone internationally could go for, and if you had a good enough story that they were interested in, and they had the budget to do that, and the big part of the budget would be the archive, because this is Olympic. And what ESPN used to really love about me was I could do a really good, I hate to now, because Donald Trump's nicked the phrase, but obviously I'd love to do a deal with the archive people. And the Olympic, my archive producer, Stephen Slater, who's amazing, is in the audience, and also wearing a similar T-shirt. And they are, at the time, they were $25,000 a minute. And I got them down to $6,000 a minute because we absolutely had to have this archive, the Olympic archive. So when I start, I know I'm going to have a great archive. I know I'm going to find great archive, and that's either myself looking, the editor looking now, obviously with someone of Stephen's caliber coming on. It's that as well. Because at the time, I don't think we had archive producers, and then it's all in the hands of the editor. So I would, if everyone loves this clip, it was absolutely my idea, and if you're not so sure, it was Nick Packer. So, and then obviously it's him that drove it. And what we've done loads of filming out with. It's a film about the race. There's 10 seconds in time, but what brought all these athletes to the start line and what happened to them afterwards. And this is the opening of it turned out to be the opening of the film. It also doubled up as the trailer, and it's just this most amazing, time where it was incredible sports moment that was then just like completely shot down just a day or so later for everyone. But obviously the lesson is everyone recovers from these drug scandals and we move on, and we still believe that everyone's doing everything cleanly. But the other thing, sorry, and because I wasn't briefed, this is genuine. At the time, like ESPN, it was always director-led. So there was no interference whatsoever, and it was always like, this is the director's vision. And I was like, are you sure? And it was absolutely director-led, and that just gave me the freedom. There were notes on stuff that we'd done, but it wasn't like you had to do it. I mean, I was mindful of them, but it was this like, this is what we think, not you have to do this. I hope it's still the same, so I've not done anything for a while with ESPN, but
Still the same.
Yeah,
Very director-friendly,
Yeah.
very much grounded in your vision and how we
Yeah.
help you bring that to life. I love it. Thank you so much, Dan. Anouk, I'm going to go to you next. I'm a huge fan of Neon Studios, and you all have done phenomenal work. Today we'll talk about Thomas Mueller specifically, because you all did a beautiful job layering not just leak footage there, but his personal video diaries. And so I'm curious, can you take us back to the project's inception before we watch the clip, and how the archive drove the story and the structure?
Well, when we first envisioned doing a film on Thomas Muller, and he was ending his career at Bayern Munich, and we knew from the beginning it was not going to be just like a typical biography doc, and we really looked at, when we spoke to our directors, like, what makes Thomas irreplaceable from his function within the team, and what makes him unique. So we decided to build it on the emotional journey of his last season, and also, the coming European Championship, and seeing like how did that journey travel, and then use that to go back in time and tell his career that way. And we used actually Panini cards to jump back and forth in time. So you saw him like evolving as well. But it's the archive that actually tied the whole story together, because we had a massive amount of archive to go through because of the longness of his career. But also it was FIFA footage, UEFA footage, the Bundesliga, the Bayern stuff. We had old interviews, so it was in ZDF and RRD and Sky, so we all need to bring that together. But what was also very unique is that the family opened up their personal archive. So we saw young Thomas really taking his first steps on the field and playing. We had pictures from their holidays together, and that really shaped who Thomas was as a character. But what's even more interesting was his personal archive. So he had this video diary that he kept during that year, and you really could see like the raw and unscripted Thomas, and you had the real emotion when it actually happened, and the despair, and the frustration of not being there, not being able to perform as he wanted for his team. And that, I think, gave the viewer as well kind of a different view of Thomas, because obviously they know him really well, and he's very outspoken, and he's on social media, but this gave like a different view of him. So all of that together kind of made the film, and we're really proud of it.
Thank you, Anouk. Ben, I think I've had the great honor of seeing you all do a great job at blending current day with archive. And you did this recently for us with a series that we did called Clutch, NBA Playoffs, which followed, of course, the playoffs as they were sort of unfolding, but it really takes you well beyond the game. Can you talk a little bit about that mixture and that balance, and how you all toggle that line at Fullwell?
Yeah, it was an amazing series to make. I'm not sure if I should be looking at you guys.
You look wherever your heart desires.
I'm going to try and do everyone.
Come here.
Yeah, I'm going to try and do everyone as I go along. What is quite interesting that that was new for us when making this series, was that we were reliant on all the footage that the NBA shot, and they shoot like a bunch of stuff. A lot of the time you want to have the camera in your hand and you want to be making it and control the scenes and ask the questions you want to ask. For Clutch, it was kind of everything, in a way it was more of an edit job to figure out which of the strands that were emerging were the interesting ones, and then find out a way to support that with some shooting, rather than the other way around, which is you shoot it and then you try and either find cutaways in the worst case scenario, or then you uncover something that adds to the story. And that, I think that's happening more and more in the sports space, because these leagues are controlling the access a lot more, and the storytelling, but you can kind of thread the needle a bit on that. But yeah, it was really interesting to work in that kind of way.
I think, well, first and foremost, I recognize that we're going to be throwing a lot at you today, but I think Archive is so special because in a sea where there's so many ideas being pitched to us, especially on the commissioning side, the thing that can really help it set aside is a really brilliant piece of archive that can sort of take you to unexpected spaces. I think yesterday my wonderful colleague, Charlie Parsons on Nat Geo team, talked a little bit about how they discovered some footage that they've never really seen before from Katrina, which is the hurricane that took place many years ago. The anniversary is coming up, and it led to a completely different conversation around race in America. And so while we're talking, I want you to see that there's a QR code here. I'll pick up the iPad, and when we have about 20 minutes left, and you can ask us any questions you like, from Ben to Anouk to Dan or myself on the commissioning side. But Dan, I'll come back to you. When you discover a piece of archive, how much of it is driving the story versus supporting it? And what does that balance look like? And Anouk and Ben, I would love to hear from you as well.
I think two examples of that are in Strike, the film from last year, and Hillsborough, which was an ESPN-driven film. And ESPN especially, that Hillsborough, one of the biggest, if not the biggest story in the UK over the last, since 1989, when the disaster happened just 3 miles away. And I knew a few characters that I wanted, and I was really keen to have people who had never spoken before as well. And there was one piece of archive that we found, which was a guy coming out of the Hallamshire Hospital, which is just up the road, and he's being interviewed. So this is on the day, just a few hours after the disasters unfolded. And he's talking, he's got his arm in a sling, and then he's talking, and then he reveals that his dad died. And he's just come out of the hospital, and his dad's dead in the hospital, and he's survived. And then they said, what's your name, sir? What's your name? And it's like, my name's Brian Anderson. And I was like, oh my God, I've never seen him before. And I was like, and there were two different groups with the Hillsborough families that had a bit of a split. So I was like, well, which group's he involved with, and how do I get a hold of him, and will he talk, and what's he doing? And he's he's a really, really sweet guy who doesn't like to talk about stuff a lot, but he came out and he became a really good character. And then when the Hillsborough Independent Panel report came out, we had the Liverpool Football Club's official sort of coverage of it. When they come out after which basically finally exonerates the fans, and they come out and it's Brian Anderson that comes out, and they were like, what do you think today? There's someone shouting, and he went, God, the bastards. And both of them are really, really key parts. And I was like, we've got to have him. We've absolutely got to, and we found him, and in that way. And so it doesn't, for me, the archive's never driven, but even from that very first film, The Game Their Lives, we had the North Koreans footage, and there was when the North Koreans, they played 3 games in Middlesbrough, they beat the Italians went home, they were pelted with Rotten Tomatoes by their own fans for being knocked out by North Korea. And then North Korea went and played at Goodison Park, Everton's ground until this season, which is at that time a 5-hour journey, and 3,000 fans went from Middlesbrough. Found a Middlesbrough fan who did that journey, and he talks about it, and he's like, had a little North Korean flag, and we were waving it around, and the North Koreans had filmed him, and we found him. And it's those moments, and I found the footage, and we were looking, I'm quite good at picking people out in crowds, and like, oh my God, he's there. And it becomes a great moment in the film, which I know when you're watching, you think, well, that's easy, and it's done, and it was a bit of luck and a bit of, but sometimes you are literally looking at the archive first. I know with Stephen, we found a lot of, for the strike film, which was the miners' strike in 1984, and the Battle of Orgreave, which is 3 miles that way, not 3 miles that way. And, we were finding people in the archive like, that's the story. We need to find that person. Yeah. So it does both, but I know we've got loads of archive. We'll build the story and then we'll find it, but often it'll take a turn. The archive will turn you.
Now, as you uncover people and shape the narrative, the archive can sort of help guide and support versus leading.
Yeah, and also, what you were saying about Thomas Muller's private art, that's the bit I love. The private archive of anyone, whether it's the ordinary person or a world superstar. It's delving into that. What I love is finding stuff, which is getting harder with digital. It's getting much harder because people, sorry, it was on my laptop. I forgot, I threw it away, never backed it up. All that, and people do remember. But also, I remember on the Amy documentary at the very beginning when she sings "Happy Birthday." At the time, I was doing the George Best film for ESPN, and I was like, no one ever filmed anything like that with George Best when he was 14. Yeah. They just didn't. And so it's a great. But I love going into people's personal archives and finding everything about them and their history, whether it gets used or not. It's just that thing. I think everyone. I really think everyone loves doing that, and you want to put as much as you can up there.
I agree with you. I think it just brings you so much deeper into the intimacy of the subject, especially if it's very subject focused, like Thomas Muller is. I'm curious, how do you all at Neon, does narrative and archive usually lead, or does it support? What's the balance there?
It kind of depends. I think sometimes a small piece of archive can trigger like a full story. I remember when we did initially the Giants was a show on sumo wrestling. We saw like this small piece of archive of a US show telling the story about these 4 Hawaiian wrestlers in the 80s that went to Japan and became like massive superstars in the world of sumo. We go like, we didn't know that, nobody knows that. And so actually we started kind of investigating the story and discovered they were like really massively popular. They have statues on in Japan, and these are just regular big guys from Hawaii that went there. But then when we started investigating, it's like obviously if you want to bring that story, you need a lot of archive because it was set in the 80s. The sumo world is a very closed world, and we needed to get the archive of them actually performing, training, and after a very long journey, I must say, we actually got the footage, and it was brilliant. And we took that footage to really tell, you know, the story and how impactful they have been in the world of sumo, but also then complementing it with images from Japan in the 80s and to illustrate what kind of world they came into. Because the guy said, like, you know, I was telling my mom, I'm just going to go to Japan. I'm going to be a sumo wrestler. And he goes like, what kind of, what are you going to do? I don't know yet. I'll figure it out, right? So, and they came in like, in a world they didn't recognize, they didn't understand the language, they were not respected. It was even more now than it is now. They really want to push them out, but they were so good that they couldn't. And this ended up in this 3-parter on sumo wrestling. And it's that kind of really small piece of archive. You said, like, you know, and there is a whole world opening up that's really interesting. And it wasn't the easiest project because when I tried to get the archive as being a female, we were not supposed to, they even didn't want to talk to me. So I had to have somebody else from the team who was not a female to actually have that conversation with them and get the footage. So it was a journey.
Anouk, I so appreciate you sharing that because those cultural nuances, especially when you're dealing with the states or when you're dealing with different perspectives and biases, you're still running a business. And so I applaud you and commend you for getting the archive and creating a wonderful piece of work. Ben, I think something that you said, you all are really interesting because now you've blended your company with a person who's very recognizable in the United States and beyond, LeBron James. And so, like, how do you all toggled personal archives and dealing with sort of athlete-led stories and, you know, stories that span beyond the athlete? And how are you all, you have a wonderful talent team, and Dan sort of touched on this. I wish that they would have filmed this. Like, how do you guys balance those conversations, knowing the kind of athletes that align with Full Well Entertainment now, and also the archive that you all discover? Because even with your previous work with Sutherland, you sort of get the feel for the environment and community there.
Yeah. Well, in terms of LeBron and big athletes and stuff, what's quite interesting in terms of the archive at the moment, and this was something we were in discussion about with ESPN, is what we call the LeBron James cinematic universe, which is like, there's a lot of obviously demand for his life story and for lots of various documentaries about him, all of which can be really interesting because, as we all know, you're kind of mining these. A lot of the time, people have made films either about it or about something that relates to it. So there's lots of different ways to skin the cat. And I'm now suddenly on the other side of the fence on that, where I'm not in charge of the archive, but I'm part of that conversation of how it can be used effectively. So there's multiple different films that are going to be super interesting, each with a different perspective, each using different parts of it. And it feeds into some of the times, because sometimes you don't have enough space for the archive. Sometimes you have to choose which one's going to be more important. So it's kind of, in a way, nice to be like, this could be that, and how you could use them all in a different way. So I mean, it just was building on some of the other conversations that these guys were having. There's also about how we use the archive. I think sometimes the archive, you see the archive differently through the process, right? Because as you learn more about the story and as different things emerges, you can watch the same piece of archive and notice something in there, or notice a tone and realize actually it's not quite telling the story you thought it was. you might have thought it was quite bland at one point, and then suddenly you're like, oh shit, there's something going on in there that I hadn't seen before that I now understand because I've got to know the character and the story better. The example that springs to mind, though it's not a sports doc, is we made a series with Ed Sheeran for Disney Plus, and through the story there, his wife gets diagnosed with cancer, one of his best friends dies, and people start suing him for copyright, which was awful for him. It's a small mercy in a music doc because it's quite boring following musicians around. Because at least in sport, they're going to play a game and someone's going to win and lose. With a musician, they can do a great tour, and it's great to see it, but it's not an amazing story. But when they shared that information with each other and with the world, made it, those pieces of archive look completely different. To be like, there's a point where there's a piece of archive and Cherry hasn't told anyone that she's got this diagnosis. And suddenly that scene, which isn't in and of itself a particularly spectacular scene, you're like, but she's walking around with that piece of knowledge, you're not telling anybody because it's not quite the right moment. So it's interesting how the same piece of archive can change through the process.
I love that example, and that was brilliant work. I love Ed Sheeran, y'all, so I was geeking out. I was like, I know him. It would be amiss to not talk about the challenges that do come with dealing with archive. I mean, as someone who helps commission, sometimes when I'm even talking to first-time filmmakers, if they are pitching an Olympic story, right, and they don't understand the gauntlet that they're getting ready to enlist in, it can be a conversation or something that we need to discuss up front before even greenlighting the project. So can you just sort of share from your own experiences what it's like to even just clear and have those chats with states, with Olympic or NBA and rights footage holders? Like, how do you tackle that conversation and go about your business?
Yeah, so it's quite a challenge for me because I've always wanted to make the definitive, so not to split anything. So it was the definitive Ben Johnson, it was the definitive Hillsboroughs. Like, no one will make a Hillsborough film after this. And Oscar Pistorius as well for ESPN, which is one of the definitive. The interesting one with Oscar was it was Livy and Connor, when we did the contract, who were then head of ESPN and head of ESPN Films. They were like, you cannot make this. They'd just done the OJ film for 7.5 hours. You cannot, in the contract, you cannot make this more than 3 hours 50. And I was like, yeah, but it's the definitive. It's going to be longer. And it ended up being considerably longer. And then there was a conversation of, well, there's an archive cost to that as well as an edit cost. So, yeah, I mean, the big challenge, you know, it's helpful to know and have a rough ballpark of what I think the more problematic ones will be to clear. You know, they all have a rate card. They all have a rate card, which is what they want to use. And if you're using more, then they'll come down. They're not. They can be flexible, but not as flexible as they used to be. And if you're in the business long enough, then you can pull the odd favour here and there. And I know on the Ben Johnson film, we were right at the end, and I was like, this is me, this is my company. When I say I can't afford that, I can't afford that, but this is the film. And I remember the Olympic people, he basically said, look, what can you afford to pay? And I gave him a price, which was considerably lower. It wasn't even a minute's worth of, you know, and he was like, we'll do it. Yeah. And then ESPN needed something else. It might have been internet rights because you couldn't do it at the time. Later, and ESPN paid for doing that so they could keep it on their platform. But yeah, there's and obviously now, you know, there are a lot of very, very good archive producers who do all that for you, and they get the headache, and then which is good because it separates me a little bit, and so if we've got a problem with the budget, and they're the ones trying to do the deals. But it's there are people who are dedicated at each archive company to deal with you and there are more and more films. But, you know, archive is really expensive. It's a very expensive film to make. And what's helpful as a filmmaker is having commissioners that know that. And so they're already ready. So they're not saying, right, I'd love a nice 3-hour film, and we've only got $150,000. What, for the archive? No, for the film. It's like, well, it's not going to work. You know, so having that preparation from both sides, really, being realistic. Actually, if you want this is what it's going to cost. The Senna film, I was always told any UK director, particularly worth their salt, will have their own Senna story of how they were approached to direct it before they went to Asif. I have my own, but I remember the conversation I had with James, the producer, because originally it was a very, very small budget, and I was like, you'll not be able to make it for that. And they were like, we will. And I named a price that I thought it would cost, and mine was obviously way nearer, because I knew the cost of the archive alone. I didn't think it would, I would not have done it like Asif done. He did it brilliantly, which made it even more expensive, because it's all archive. So even more expensive than I'd have made it. Yeah. But that's the thing, you know, you just have to understand and be realistic that this is what it's going to cost, and whatever you think it'll cost, it'll be more, way more. And so again, it's like also sometimes I've had to go, and it's been ESPN, it's been others. The archive has cost a lot more, and this is the cost report. I do really like it. I'm willing to take a hit on my fee, but can you do your bit?
Yeah.
And so there's always a way of making things work.
Before we go to Anouk and Ben, because I want to hear your perspective on it, I will just say how we handle archive in that conversation is I get pitched things all the time, and I think because people want a green light, they'll be like, oh, we can do this for, I'm making this number up, $10. And I'm like, you're going to need like $1 million. And I'm happy to give you the $1 million because the story is brilliant. So please know that from a commissioning perspective, that's a conversation we can have as well. We have an amazing woman, Jen Thorpe, on our
Torpedo.
Yeah, on our rights and clearance team. She is phenomenal, and we'll really always have a conversation, especially if we need to have it earlier on, because we don't just work with. I mean, you know, from Anouk to Ben and Dan, we've had, you know, projects we've worked on together. They've had tremendous experience in this industry, but we also work with first-time filmmakers, so sometimes they don't know that, right? And then, Anouk, I promise I'm going to go to you. 2 years ago, we were, Cindy, Maria, and myself, we were at this festival called On Air Fest. It's a very big podcast festival, and this woman had the story of an Olympic athlete who she had a chance to interview, and she sort of covered her as she was preparing for the Olympics, and she was in a country that was very impoverished, and she migrated to a different country in the middle of her training and ended up passing away on this boat. But she had all of the archive. And so she basically was the rights owner, and she basically was trying to give it to us away. And I was like, no, you do not understand what you're sitting on. We're going to do this, but we need to do this at a price that you can walk away feeling comfortable. That what you have is kind of like a needle in a haystack, and it's special, and we want to honor how special it is. So please know it's always a conversation as well on our end. But Anouk and Ben, back over to you. Like, talk us through how you navigate. You know, we heard from Dan the challenges that come with rights and clearances, and sort of the balance that you strike with commissioners and, you know, negotiating as well.
Well, that's always the fun part in the archive rights. From our point of view, we try to start as early as possible because it takes so much time to clear everything and to have those conversations. But also to kind of assess how much you will need, and as you said, like platforms and commissioners know what kind of the archive costs, and there are rate cards. There is some flexibility in negotiating around that, so we try to be as creative with the rights negotiations as we are in the edit. But the complexity of, you know, wanting more and just needing more to tell stories, sometimes you just don't have that liberty, and so then it comes down to also talking to the platform or the commissioners and make sure that we always also understand what they actually need, because what I feel is the most frustrating part is that afterwards comes like, oh, but we want to go to a festival, or we want to use it in trailering, and we want to, so make sure that we capture like everything that is needed, because going back makes it even more expensive afterwards. So try to get there on the same page really from the start of the film. I think that is important, and we also try to be creative. Sometimes, well, the budgets run out. Can you replace some things with pictures? Can you add a small animation, or the techniques to do it more efficiently and more cost effective right now? Or can you do some reenactment? It's like in the Calvin film, we used like an actor to play the young Calvin, and just we try to look at archive a bit broader than that as well if we run out of means.
It's
to
great
be
when you
filmed.
got a director who's like, don't destroy my vision.
Yeah,
I can't have a still there. It has to be the
I know,
Yeah.
but well, so it's always
Mm.
a tricky part, and I do most of the negotiations,
Yeah.
and it gets really frustrating, and finding that balance in bringing the right product for a viewer within a reasonable price as well.
Of course. I mean, Ben, how do you all tackle that on the full entertainment side? Just like clearing archive, having the conversations. I mean, and Anouk even touched on this when you're dealing with people's personal archive as well.
Well, I've got a relevant story to tell, but I want to just pick up on what both of them, I think, are saying that I feel like I've learned through this period, which is picking what the hill to die on is. Because like we all like really care about what we're doing, and it's tempting. It's certainly at the beginning, I will like fight you for fucking everything all the way through. And like actually with that experience, you can't make that call to the Olympics unless they know that you describe, unless they know that you've worked in good faith and they love the film and they're like, I believe him when he says this. And with experience, I think you learn and sometimes it's like, bugger, that's not, like, there's still a work just as well there. And sometimes it's like, no, if we don't have this exact bit of footage for this amount of time, that's going to really change things. So I think with experience, we've learned how to judge that. And that good faith conversation, I think, extends to everyone. Because I know when we talk about a project, when you say to me, how much should it cost? Sometimes I'll say to you, how much should it cost? Because when you're dealing, the commissioners obviously, like, they're the gatekeepers and they hold the keys to whether you're going to make this thing that you've like worked so hard for. But like their job is more on the line than yours. And if it doesn't work for a multitude of reasons, they have to carry that as much as you, maybe more. And we've made projects in the past, especially when people were throwing money around in that streaming boom, where you were like, there's no chance for success. Actually, there was no chance for success for that film, even if it's great, because it cannot bring the audience it's supposed to bring. So there's a short buzz of like, it was great to do that there, but actually in the long term, it doesn't work for anybody. So I think that sort of good faith and good judgment, I think, goes through everything. The story I wanted to tell was we made a film with Usain Bolt, went to the Olympics with him when in Rio when he won the third set of medals. And through the process, we came across this archive that his roommate had shot with him the night before the first race he ran at the Olympics. So it's like, and then the moment before he goes out from being unknown to the world to then coming back to his room as Usain Bolt. It's like totally magical. You could have put the whole thing out there in just rushes. It was so unbelievable to watch. And we put it in the film, we clear all the archive, and we realize as we speak to the Olympics, they're like, the Olympics, the IOC go, we own that.
Yeah.
We're like, what? It's like we own that. It's in the Olympic Village. And suddenly the film, which is like, you've gone through it and you've like taken out every extra frame so you hit the minute count. And it's like, you can't lose this. It's too amazing. But it's like, it's 10 or 15 minutes worth of, because it's so beautiful. And that was the moment after all the toing and froing where we finally got Usain. Like at the end, the only option was Usain himself wrote to the IOC on our behalf, because he loved the film, it was all good faith thing, and he wrote them. He was like, after everything I've done, after everything I've done for you guys, you can't like watch the film, you'll see it. And then at that moment, because the judgment is right, they were like, yeah, of course, it's amazing,
Because anything in a stadium or wherever on a match day is owned by something, and the IOC in the village, press conference before. So even if someone else has shot it and you're doing the archive, that's not owned by BBC. BBC can give you the footage because they've shot it, but the actual rights lie with the IOC if it's an Olympic thing.
And we've met people before who like the talent, the star, and they'll be, I've got a massive personal archive, and you go and see it, you're like, you don't own any of that. That's just, you've just recorded on VHS the time you were on the news. That's not archive. You're like, so that can happen too.
The other thing I think experience showed me in terms of, at the beginning of my sort of journey in this industry, it's like it was all about me. It's what I want to do, what I want to put on the screen, I want that footage, I want it, and I want to clear it, and I've got this amount of money. And over time, especially as you get the connections and the relationships with the archive people, and you know what they want, and some are driven by film, they're really into film, they're really into your film, and they'll go out and bat for you. And some are a salesman, and they're literally driven by the sales. So, it's the end of the quarter. We'll do a deal to get it over the line. It's like going to buy a car, or the end of the year, or they need to get X amount of money sold now, and that's what will work. And you have to be there a while, but it's always mindful to think, what is it that they want? I know what I want. What is it that they want to get that? And only, I guess, experience and relationships do that for you.
Well, it's funny because you're going to bring us to a conversation I want to have, which is like, what do you wish you knew when you first started? That would be helpful for anyone sitting in this room. I would say, to go off of what Ben even said, just from a pure commissioning standpoint, I feel so lucky. I feel like I have the best job in the world to have this role. And as I've sort of meet with different people that I could have only ever dreamed of, you sort of joked about, like, people are like, oh, here's my archive. I have a great deal of archive.
Yeah.
I just had a conversation with a friend who's an athlete and actually has someone living in his house that films him all the time. So it's from an environment perspective, Dan, which you touched on, the environment sort of belongs to him. They shoot a lot in his property. They shoot a lot in these spaces. However, the way that he structured his contract with this employee did not specify that the employee was a work for hire.
Right.
So the employee thought that they were a co-partner in it. And you sort of have to have those conversations. And I'm like very honest with people I really care about, and people in general. It's kind of probably my Achilles heel is honesty, of being like, you really have to make sure that you are going into things wide open, not just for what you're doing today, but for what you ultimately may want to do, because archive is you cementing history in real time, in my opinion. And so I guess Dan, Anouk, and Ben, like, what do you wish you would have known when you were first starting in this process based on everything we've talked about?
It's weird, I don't think I wish I knew anything. I'm really pleased.
It's like, I'm good.
I'm really pleased I didn't know a lot of stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I think I always needed someone to say no to me to then go, I can't swear. Go away, I'm going to do it anyway, kind of scenario. No one believed the first North Korean film is about North Korean World Cup football team, the greatest shock in World Cup history. America 1950 doesn't count. And it's like, for those who knew, America beat England in 1950. And the World Cup was going to be in South Korea the following year. What's not to like? There was a company whose sole job was to invest in creativity in Sheffield who said, I don't see the story. I was going to North Korea, first Westerner to go and get that access in North Korea, find the remaining, those that are alive, and no one got it. So I kind of, I was always pushing. I needed people to say no, and I was learning all the time. I think I was maybe better off not knowing, because a lot of the knowledge is almost, it can be a bit, too much for you to like work. Oh yeah, you need to get a commissioner that really understands archive. You need to get that. You need to know it's going to cost you $1 million. Oh, I'm not sure I'll do that. I'm just, I was just going to go ahead and do it anyway. And I'll find a commissioner with $1 million. So I don't know. I'm really unsure of. I know what I've learned, but almost sometimes you need to learn that, I guess.
I kind of love how Dan rolls. He's like, and I'm going to do it anyway. So I'm like, as the East Coaster, there's a level of respect that I love about that, because if you are that adamant about your creative vision, as he mentioned, we are very director-friendly, like, we're going to do everything we can to honor that, really. Anouk, what do you wish you would have known sort of in starting?
I think, well, we have similar examples as to your example, right? When you start using a lot of archive, you're really understanding what is archive. And it's not because you have shot it that it's typically or doesn't need to be cleared or needs to. So it's really finding in the whole world of complexity that archive is, to really understand, like, what are the do's and don'ts, what do you need to clear, what can you shoot, who owns it, when does archive actually become archive, because it will affect your release dates as well. And sometimes we even got like, oh, we need this to be released like in end of August. It's like, that cannot be true, because we have archive from the league in there, and then only becomes archive.
Yeah, I mean, an example of that, Premier League footage. If you want a Premier League footage from next season, it doesn't become archive until a year later. You think it's archive, but it's not. That's a really good point.
That kind of understanding, and we've learned a lot by using it a lot. But also, as I said in the beginning, start in time, start really at the beginning, because it's such a long process. At least I think it's a long process, and just have enough time and money and a good archive producer as well. So I think that's I think the most things that from my perspective, we've learned. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough one to answer. I sort of agree that, like, in a way, being like not knowing what the hell I was doing at the beginning did give a certain strength of like to the ambition, and I might not have embarked on some of the things that in the end just about worked out. I wouldn't have followed these 5 kids around.
Yeah.
They found in our office a I don't know if I've told you, the call sheet that we made for him, it was called In the Hands of the Gods. And we just knew so little. It's like, 10th of like March till 14th of March, New York, 14th of March till 1st of April, America, 1st of April till unspecified date, South America. We knew like nothing. And if I had have
You
known,
probably wouldn't make that film.
yeah,
That film probably wouldn't get made.
Yeah.
Well, not by you.
Certainly not by us. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So in a way, it's like there's different stages of your career where the right amount of knowledge is useful, and sometimes because everyone said you shouldn't do it, and they were right, but it kind of worked out.
We were in North Korea filming a crane. They were building a market. It was the very first market to be built, as in a capitalist market in North Korea. And we're filming a guy doing. My cameraman was there, and he was underneath the crane, and I was taking photos, stills. I was doing the sound, and I was taking stills. And I just sort of like went, oh my God, I can never take this photo because I mean the health and safety and all that. My cameraman's underneath a North Korean crane. It's ridiculous. You wouldn't, and that's the thing, you're braver, less sensible when you're younger and you're sort of starting out.
Totally. Yeah. But I think the thing that does emerge is that the obstructions and the things that get in your way are the things that make your film amazing in the end. Sunderland, they wouldn't let us in the dressing room. It was total chaos. It was a complete nightmare. And so we focused on the fans, and so we made a different film than what we would have made if the plan had have worked. And there's that film, there's a Lars von Trier film which is called The 5 Obstructions, where he gave himself just like bonkers limitations on his filmmaking. I think there's one short where everything can only be like 14 frames or something like that. But it's an illustration of how those obstructions make your stuff unique. So when they come along, say thank you.
Yeah, but sometimes I've seen examples of films not even getting made in the end.
Yeah.
I was contacted a while ago by a fellow production company saying, oh, please can you help us out, because we have filmed this whole year with a football player playing at Napoli and we can't seem to agree with them. So we thought we go to Syria and they give us, a rate card and the rights. And then they figured out that actually the club owned the rights because it works differently in Italy.
Yeah.
And that film never got made because they sat on it.
Yeah. And then something like The Last Dance is that process, that complete nightmare for somebody, eventually led to a treasure trove for someone else, a decade or so later, and use that archive to make something unbelievable.
1,000%. I mean, we're going to transition to questions in about 5 to 7 minutes. So if you have any, I will say whether we can answer on the ESPN side. Ben, Dan, and Anouk are super lovely and friendly, and I'm sure they would answer any question you all have. I would say one of the things you all touched on was understanding sort of your commissioner as well. And we are happy to help you with your archive. But I would say it's really important for you to know what rights we have, because that makes the conversation so much easier and the budget so much easier. I always share this example. We do World Cup films. We do films on the Olympics. However, we're not the rights holder to those things. So oftentimes when people pitch us the idea, and you're kind of banking on me to like be a really co-conspirator, that provides some challenges, right? Like one of the things I love about our relationship with, like we work on a lot of projects with Ben when we were working on the NBA, or when we're talking about NFL content or any sort of content, is we're already co-conspiring together on how to tackle the conversation with the league, right? And so it's just important to know also your audience on the other side and how they may be helpful or limited in that help for you as well.
I actually had to avoid the mentioning the word ESPN to an awful lot of archive houses, because the moment I did that, another zero was added.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, well, they've given me, it doesn't matter what they make worldwide, this is my budget. And so I would avoid all that. Weirdly, and at the beginning, 979 was the very first time ESPN had done a co-production. They put part of the production money in, but they were the first one to commit big. But what ESPN does as an outright buy, what was required of me clearance-wise, was like, we need an archive budget to reflect that.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously a lot of times it was like, well, everything's got to be in perpetuity. And you're like, well, the
do ask.
IOC has never done more than 10 years. Now we got a 20-year again. It was a weird one, but yeah, sort of knowing, you know, do you need it for America only? Do you need it for worldwide? Do you need, you know, once, you know, is it UK? Is it TV only? Is it, like you said, festivals? Is it this? Is it that?
Yeah.
There's all sorts of things, and again, just experience and a very, very experienced archive producer now, because archive producer wasn't necessarily a line in the films when we were all starting out. Certainly not.
Yeah, 1,000%. We have some questions here, and I want to make sure we get to all of them for you. Some of these questions, y'all are good. I'm just gonna say that y'all are really good. I like that some of these questions are a little bit more about each of your individual stories more so than it is about the filmmaking, because the filmmaker, as we talked about, and the director is just as important as the content, the archive, and what we're doing together. So someone said, what was the first roles you did to gain traction in the careers you now hold? They're looking for just like, how do you get your foot in the door? I mean, Dan, I'll start with you.
So if anyone knows me, all roads lead back to Sheffield Wednesday. So I wrote a book on Sheffield Wednesday, and the thing that I was only 22 at the time, and I really wanted the research I did and going to interview people. I knew this is what I want to do, but I actually want to do this on screen. Like that was my next thing I'd written, and it was quite a big book and big in size, not necessarily in volume. You know, it was what I wanted to do, and I got a job at Sky Sports at the time through. They were doing a quiz with fans, and they needed questions, and the official historian at Sheffield Wednesday wanted to charge them for writing some questions for a section, and they were like, we've got no money, so he's like, well, I'm not doing it. Try him, he's 22, he's written a book, he'll do it for nothing. And I was like, oh, I will do it for nothing, but I want to meet the producer. I want to come down and see the programme, which was, for those people who know, it was Soccer Extra, but also I ended up working on Soccer AM and Soccer Extra in the very, very early days. And that's how I got it. And then I pitched Sky a documentary series while I was working there, and they'd never internally commissioned. And then about a year later, the guy just the head of Sky Sports put it in his drawer, and he was clearing it out. He came across it, and he was like, oh my God, this is great. We'll do this after the '98 World Cup. So I made this documentary series for Sky from late '97 to summer of '98. And that's kind of how I got my foot in the door, was to just have the balls to say, no, I'll do it for free, but I want to come and meet the producer, and I want to come and see I want to see what's happening on the day of and I got it was a production runner job, and then worked from production runner up to in TV as producer. The director's someone that directs the studio or directs the football game. And that's why I worked my way up to that. And then I left for another independent company that was based in Sheffield, which was next door to the original office of the DocFest in the workstation. It had a view of one window looked out, and there's another stadium in Sheffield I don't like to talk about. And you could see it, and I did genuinely put black card covering the window, so I didn't have to look there. And then I left that to raise the money for North Korean film, to go out to North Korea myself and form my company there. But yeah, the just having that, I guess, tenacity to say, yeah, I want to see what this is.
Cleverness. That's a really good ask.
Yeah.
Pretty smart.
Yeah.
I have deep appreciation. I mean, Ben and Dan, y'all are great, but I'm giddy that Anuga's sitting on the stage with me, because she is kind of a big deal, y'all. And she's very humble, so she won't tell you, so I will. She's kind of a big deal. They do incredible work. They operate in many spaces. And on top of that, you shared an analogy of like just how challenging it could be at times. How did you get started, and what was that like for you?
I started like a really long time ago, I'm afraid. So I was a producer on the World Cup it was taking place in Japan and Korea, so that's...
At least it was this century.
Yeah, well...
I started last century.
And it was for the VRT, so the public broadcaster, and I was kind of doing the live shows as well in early morning, and we need to be aware of, the kind of content we showed, because there was a lot of kids potentially viewing, and actually I was the one trying to manage everything, and we had like famous people in the studio and talking about sports and obviously what was happening. And then was one crazy guy decided to take off all his clothes and just walk through the screen, and I was going like with a like, oh no, this is not going to happen. So it's kind of was my first experience in sport. Kind of moved to the more corporate side after that. Like, I'm not sure if this is for me, but I worked for a cable company, Liberty Global, and sat at the commissioning side, so only movies, series. At the time, they took over Canal Plus, rebranded that to New Movie and Sports Series, started doing the local sports league, live football, and then moved to 11 Sports when it started, no, The Zone. Started that with a bunch of people, and was all about live sports. And I did everything from setting up the team till actually arranging all the live feeds and all of that, and then managed multiple countries. And then kind of like this live sports is interesting, but you know there's so much more that's not been told. And what do people do actually when they're not watching live sports? So that's kind of how Neo came about. So I went to our shareholder and said, like, you know, I think we should create our own non-live sports stories. So we founded Neo, and the first show that we did was Take Us Home Leeds United, which was kind of an obvious choice because our shareholder owned the club, so kind of went like, oh, you know, here's some money, start filming, nothing is forbidden, you can go in. So. And that was for us a showcase to actually show what we could do. And that eventually got commissioned by Amazon. And that started the ball rolling for Neo. And when 11 Sports got sold to The Zone, I decided not to go with that sale and just stay at Neo side, because I think this is the fun side to be at and the more creative side. And now we have a great team built, and I'm really proud of them. And we're telling sports stories. So
it's a really good story to because the 2002 World Cup in South Korea, in 2002 South Korea played Italy and beat them, but obviously in 1966 North Korea had played Italy and beaten them. And I was watching in England, and it was an early morning in England. And just at the beginning of the game, when the sort of teams came out, I don't know if you remember this, they all held up cards, and it said at both ends of the ground, and you can see, just look it up, the images are everywhere. Again, 1966. Again on the top tier, 1966. And I was like, oh my God, they know about it. Because at the time, both governments were dictatorships, communist and capitalist, but dictatorship. So North Korea's results weren't allowed to be known in South Korea. And in South Korea, the newspaper had the 8th World Cup, the last 8 in the competition are, and it listed 7 teams, no North Korea. So I was like, oh my God, how do they know about it? And it turned out that my doc had been on South Korean television the week before and had started a conversation. And the reason that documentary is so good is because the North Koreans, being a propaganda country, had brought a four-man camera team with 35 mil and filmed it all. So we had all their archive from 1966 in 35mm, which we took as reels from North Korea on the train to Beijing on a 25-hour journey, and then got it all copied over, all signed documents saying this is a work of art, will get returned to North Korea. But because of all that original archive, which then made a huge impact on the country, they consider North Korea the same, even though it's divided. And yeah, so they had this amazing moment. And I was like crying in my lounge going, oh my God, they know about it. And they only knew about it because of that archive.
Oh, I love that connectivity.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Ben, I'm going to go with you. Tell us a little bit about your life story here. And then I'm going to do a 10-minute rapid fire on all the wonderful questions y'all are sending here.
I'll do it quickly. I basically didn't know what the hell I was going to do with my life until I discovered editing. And then I realized exactly what I was going to do with my life. I literally, from the minute I touched an edit suite. And after a while of sort of I was thinking to myself that I wasn't getting good enough footage. I thought I better get my own footage then. If you think, and I noticed that some of the editors at that time that I'd met, some of them carry this frustration. So I was like, I don't want to be that guy, so I'm going to go for it. And then my brother, my second cousin, one of my childhood friends who are a little bit younger than me steadily left uni and were just the perfect partners for me, and we made a film called In the Hands of the Gods, and it made its way into 70 cinemas, and Lionsgate distributed it. At that point I was 30. And then
It was an amazing breakthrough film. You're underselling what you did at the time.
it was thank you.
Yeah.
It was it was an amazing adventure as well to make it, and that launched full well, and we've worked together ever since. And yeah, it's been a great journey. And in a way, the interesting thing I think, if the purpose of the story is how can you learn from that, is that I was very lucky to have partners with very different skill sets. There are things that I can do brilliantly, and there are things I'm like dreadful at. And it just so happened that between us, we had all those bases covered, and we managed to really make it work over a period of time.
Really make it work, and now they blended their company with a really big star. I mean, what I love about Ben's story, and Ben, I don't mean to embarrass you in saying this, is that kind of just stuck with it, kind of just did the thing that had a fire burning in his tummy, and did it with people he loved and cared about, and it all worked out. And so don't ask me how you become a commissioner, because I don't know. I was literally just a producer. I was a girl, grew up in the Dominican, thought I wanted to be a doctor, grew up in a farm, that's what I saw. And someone said, you'd be great in TV. And I said, what is that? And do they pay? Because I got bills to pay. And then I became a producer, did not love all the decisions I saw being made, similar to Anouk. And then I just started saying yes to things that I didn't know what to do, but I felt capable in solving if given the right chance and opportunity. And that's just led to opportunities. I always joke that I've never applied to a job just because I sort of when no one wanted to do the one thing, I would just say, I'll help, I'll do it. And it's worked out. So when this seat became vacant, I said, I'll help, and I will blend this with another team I was leading, and it worked out. Okay, this is a really interesting question. I'm going to try to get through as many of these as possible, so I'll do speed round, and Ben, I'll start with you, then go to Anouk and Dan. In a heavily self-documented society where content is heavily accessible, what do you think the future of uncovered, unseen archive materials will be in docs?
Great
I know.
question.
Such a good one.
Yeah, because also, like, archives change. Things that used to feel really special are now all over the place. I don't know fully the answer, but definitely brilliant storytelling, and finding that thing that is both specific to that story and universal to everyone is some kind of key, I would say.
Yeah, it's a very, very difficult question. I think it's finding that unique piece of archive, like, for example, like we did with the Giants, is kind of look for that and build on that. And I think that there is still a lot of stories untold, so I'm sure that will happen.
Yeah, I agree. Nothing really to add. It is just, for me, it's always character-led, and I'm sort of like nicely pigeonholed as a sports films, and none of them are about the sport. Did one film with Victoria Pendleton, which is also very heavy archive-led, amazing track cyclist on the BBC, and it was actually about her psychology and her brain more than anything. And Rio Ferdinand tweeted on the night they went out, goes, I've just watched this film about Victoria Pendleton. I've still got no idea how she goes around a track. Like, yeah, you're not meant to. It's not a film about track cycling. Yeah. So yeah, for me, it's just find the story, the characters, and for me, it's always about the archive. Like that, how does that add to it? I think that will always be the future. Yeah. But you're right. I'd not thought of it. What we think is really amazing now is it might be everywhere in a while. So yeah.
Here's what I'll say though. I do think that people have fleeting memory spans. Maybe it's just me, y'all, and it's age getting to me. But you just sort of forget things, right? And so I would say if there's brilliant uncovered material that you see now, I would figure out a way to document it somewhere and revisit it in 10 years from now. Because the reality is, like, it's really top of mind for you now, but it might not be top of mind then. Like, we just commissioned a film on a short that was the most viral tweet in 2017. It was a guy who was he was doing the ski championship. It was a world competition, and he'd never seen snow. I'm not even joking. And people like sort of hassled him, made fun of him for it, and then this brilliant director sort of kept with him and let enough time go by, and we're actually doing this short. And it's going to be not just brilliant and like we're laughing at him. It's actually brilliant because we're laughing with him, and it's focused us in humanity in the digital age and what it means to be a tweet, when in reality they don't understand your circumstances. And so I would just say that as a tip as well. Okay, more rapid fire here. Ask the panel, how do they feel about AI versus archive?
What's AI?
Yeah, good one, Dan.
Thanks.
I don't know, no say.
Yeah.
This could be anyone.
Someone, one of my sound recordists, said that the beauty of sound recording is that it'll never get taken over by AI, and then someone showed him how it could be. And he's quite depressed now. And I understand that there are documentaries made by AI at the moment. And weirdly, actually, it's not an archive thing, but I was doing a few pictures a year and a half ago, and they kept coming up like, can you write three pages on this? Can you write, do the, and I was like, and someone said, and I hadn't heard the phrase ChatGPT at the time, and so literally I typed into ChatGPT, make a 3-part series on X while they navigate this season, and it wrote it, and I was like, again, I can't swear. Oh my gosh, it's like, that's what I'd have written, and that was on like that. And then suddenly you're like, oh no, are we all that obvious?
Yeah.
Is there, we all think we're really creative and we do things to formula. But I don't know if, who knows? That then delves into truth and documentary if you start introducing AI.
Yeah.
AI versus archives, Anouk and Ben.
I have a thought aside.
Give it. Safe space.
Well,
Trust false.
one thing I was thinking about archive is we're talking about the complete. We're talking about sound and vision, and some of the time I'm super jealous of podcasters, although they now have to do video as well. When I first, in the old days of podcasts, was like, oh, you don't have to because sometimes you'll find like really good audio archive, and then you have to like figure out what the hell you're going to put on screen to go along with it, and that's its own challenge sometimes. So I wonder if there might be some avenues that AI can help with that, rather than replace it. As you say, there's a whole true thing of like you could make all kinds of stuff up, but that's just a thought that if it could be helpful in that, you could find ways of bringing images on it.
Yeah, in the old days on TV here, don't know if it was the same in America, but you had to put reconstruction on whenever you were reconstructing to make sure that everyone knew it wasn't archive.
Yeah.
You put AI, but you'll never do it. They'll find a way to get rid of AI. Yeah.
Anouk, any thoughts?
It would be really interesting to see how it evolves, and we all have done, the same thing, just putting things in ChatGPT, and it brings in sometimes really good stuff back, and we try to look at it as how it can help in shaping us the better story, rather than to be the story. And I think sometimes when you make a film trying to be creative in how to tell a story, maybe there are elements of AI that you could integrate if it fits your vision and it fits the whole film, but still being honest in what you're telling. I think that, to me, is important.
I second what Anouk said. That's probably what we're looking for from a commissioner's perspective, too. It needs to make sense. It can't just be because the tool is available. Okay, I'm going to ask you to answer this in 15 seconds each. Can you highlight any tools that you recommend that can help streamline archive?
There's a thing called Moments Lab that we started using for, it's not just for archive, it's for the edit in general, where you can like search into it, get me all the shots of LeBron James in the yellow Lakers shirt hitting a 3-pointer. It's not quite there yet, but that side, those tools are going to be like wildly useful. It's called Moments Lab is the one we're using. There's lots of different like other ones, but that's the one. That
Traditionally I've used ArchiveOx because I honestly can't think of any other tool to recommend at the moment. And I hate spreadsheets. I really don't. Me and spreadsheets don't work very well. But ArchiveOx has been incredibly useful for the archive producer, but more for the edit in terms of the searching.
Yeah.
I don't personally use any of those tools. I know that our archive producers are experimenting with a lot of them. So I actually need to check which one.
Yeah, I mean, I've just searched a very old project. I've dug out the ArchiveOx and found something. An archive producer came to me, like, I'm doing something else, and I know it's in that. And I'm like, I've got this drive. I don't know what was the label. And she went back and found what it was, and then I've sent it to her. And it's all done through that ArchiveOx. So,
Thank you for sharing those tools. If you need us to repeat them again, let us know. I'll leave 30 seconds at the end. Someone says, from a commissioner's perspective, how do you assess archive-led projects that use sport as an entry point into deeper themes like identity, politics, gender, etc.? And might seem initially purely sports focused. Honestly, we don't commission anything, regardless of how spectacle amazing the archive is, if it doesn't touch into a greater theme. It starts with sports, but it has to extend the conversation beyond that. It has to lead to more cultural conversations impacting, I think I'm just here for the riots, it was a conversation about archive of people like smashing things, and it was absolutely striking to see it played back in real time, but it was really a conversation about digital age as much as it was about sports and about like the policing in social media that's taking place and now accessible and able to do that because of the tools. So I would say we purely only commission films that broaden beyond the sports world, especially now with content living in so many spaces and places. ESPN is not just ESPN on its own, it's ESPN on Disney Plus, more of a family sort of audience, more culturally relevant stories. When you look at ESPN on Hulu even, you're looking and sitting next to, content like Keeping Up with the Kardashians, which Ben's Teams does. So in that sense, we have to understand that the audience is very female-centric and leading, and that's what the insights share with us. And we have 40 seconds, but last but not least, someone said here, if everyone can give in closing just quick thoughts on when pitching a story where the archive includes something visually striking, how do you help commissioners see beyond the spectacle and understand the emotional or political resonance of the story?
How?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the pitch.
Give some pitching tools here.
That's the pitch. I mean, that is the pitch. You know what I mean? So, and that's what you just said before about, like, it's all about the resonance.
Just really quickly, the Game of Their Lives, I came back with all that 35 mil, put a 3-minute, wouldn't have been called a sizzle, just a 3-minute thing together, BBC commissioner in, watch that, and he was like, oh my God, yes. Show them.
Show them.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, that is the pitch, getting the whole story together and across. I mean, yeah.
I love that. Well, in closing, show, don't tell us. I think clarity is kindness, and I think the humanity in the storytelling and how you utilize the archive and your unique perspective sort of connected to all that is what makes for things that we want to commission. So if you took time to come here and join us today, we thank you on behalf of Ben, Anouk, Dan, and myself. We're honored that you could spend your early afternoon with us, and we look forward to seeing y'all. If you're interested in learning more about ESPN, we'll be at Birdhouse today at 7 p.m. Come and have a chat, come and have a drink, and if not, I will see you at the festival. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.